So were you suggesting that that is no longer causing public concern?
Well, I'm suggesting that it causes a lot less concern now than it did before the application, or at the time the application was made. But I don't have any actual record of the concern.
Well, is it something you've looked at all?
No, it's just a general perception that I have.
Well, you may not be able to help that, but because in actual fact there's still lots of complaints and concerns raised in relation to it on.
Well, I don't know the details.
You don't know. Okay. Right, can we just go to your proof then? Paragraph 11.14.
Yes.
In that paragraph, you tell us about the substantial investment that's going to be made in building the facility.
Yes.
Of the order of about £70 million.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't tell us is what, if any, of that investment will go to the local community or whatever. £70 million is essentially paying for the equipment and the building.
Well, I don't have the breakdown of the information. That is the total investment.
Yeah, that's the total figure, but how much, if any, of it might filter into the local economy is not something we've got any figure on, is it?
No.
Right, now, again, I think it's agreed between us that perception of risk to human health is accepted as material consideration.
Yes.
The issue between us is the weight to be given to it in this case.
Yes.
You've referred the inspector again to a number of decision letters on this. I don't think you adduced any further evidence to address this question of weight to be given other than the decision letters, do you?
No, my references are to the decision letters and to the Secretary of State's policy.
Yeah. Okay. And indeed, the fact that it will be, or this facility will be a modern facility, it doesn't of itself remove that perception of risk as a material consideration, does it?
No.
Okay. Nor, as we've agreed with respect to the issues this morning on regeneration, does it in fact delay public perceptions or fears as such, does it?
Well, it doesn't remove those as a material consideration. Okay.
And again, the appeal decisions with respect to that issue of public perception of risk to health have turned on the evidence and the individual circumstances of the case before the decision making, haven't they?
Well, they've turned on the evidence and the application of the Secretary of State's policy and the various expert evidence that has been available to the Secretary of State and the inspector.
So again, in fact, perhaps par excellence, a situation where you have an issue which is, as a matter of principle, a material consideration, but then you have to determine the weight to give to it.
Yes.
Par excellence, I think, is something that will depend upon the particular circumstances of the case.
It will, as with regeneration and economic impact, it will depend upon the circumstances of the case, having regard to the policy and the evidence, both on a general basis and a location-specific basis.
Yes. Now, you spent quite a bit of time dealing with the Blue NG appeal decision in chief, and all the grounds as to why you think it's different.
Yes.
And can I just understand, your position is it that if we're going to look at appeal decisions and draw anything from them, it's very important that we do that assessment as to just how comparable the two are. Because I don't think, to be fair to you, Mr. Singleton, we see you doing that sort of detailed assessment of all of the appeal decisions that you say support your case and comparing them with the situation here, do
Well, no, but I refer to those appeal decisions primarily to demonstrate how the inspectors who had held the inquiries into those decisions, how they have applied the Secretary of State's policy.
And can we just look at Blue NG for a minute? Core document 150. Now, the inspector's conclusions, I think, are in section 10 of the report, aren't they?
Yes.
Starting at page 38. And he deals first with transportation.
Yes.
And then comes on to look at air quality on page 41 in section 10.3.
Yes.
And we can see from the first paragraph that the whole of the borough was an AQMA, which you say is an important factor to bear in mind.
Borough-wide one, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Of course, the consequence of it being a borough-wide AQMA would mean, wouldn't it, that in actual fact there would be nowhere within the borough you could place this development without it affecting the AQMA.
I think that's right, yes, that seems to be a sensible conclusion.
Yeah. And of course, in actual fact, there are locations in Greater Manchester and even in Trafford which are not parts of an AQMA, aren't there?
Yes. The AQMA is very different. It's, as Mr. Oakham has said, it's very much focused on the major transport corridor.
Yeah. And we don't have any modelling to tell us precisely what the position is, Mr. Singleton. But bearing in mind the difference in the nature of the AQMA here and that in Ealing, it would be a fair conclusion to draw, wouldn't it, that there would be opportunities to consider sites that would not have an effect upon the AQMA.
Before I just answer that question, sir, I think I'm entitled to know whether the local authority is now going to run an alternative sites argument.
No, I'm not.
That is, that it's going to be suggested that there may be or is some alternative location where the facility could be located. Because that case has not emerged, and I have not thus far been required to meet it.
Well, I've said I'm not. I'm dealing with a different point. Thank you very much, Mr. Keys. Thank you.
So, will you repeat the question?
Yes. Given the nature of the AQMA here
In Trafford.
in Trafford and in Greater Manchester, it would not be an unreasonable conclusion to draw that there is the potential for there to be places where you could locate this type of facility which would not have an impact upon the AQMA, would it?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that question, but Greater Manchester is a large area, and as we've agreed, the AQMA covers only a part of that area.
You see, if anything, this point of distinction which you seek to draw between Blue NG and here, I would suggest to you, Mr. Singleton, doesn't help you, because all that we're being told in Blue NG is there isn't anywhere you could locate the site without it affecting an AQMA. That may not, as you told us, be the position here. If anything, it makes the Blue NG case a stronger case in support of us, doesn't it? Because in actual fact, effectively the conclusion here was you couldn't cite it in Ealing, wasn't it?
I can't agree with that proposition, because I don't have enough information about the background of the Blue NG proposal. I've not reviewed all the evidence. But my instinct about it, based on what I have seen, is that this is a facility which is in Greater London. And Greater London is many, many more times greater in its area than Greater Manchester. The fuel source, I think, is very different, and I don't know where that is coming from. What we are talking about here is first and foremost an energy proposal which meets, as I've said, full square the locational criteria which are set out in EN3, and therefore is fully appropriate. There is no need or requirement for us to address alternative sites, but we have addressed the locational criteria within the waste plan, and we have demonstrated to the satisfaction of GMGU and all the guardians of that plan that this is an appropriate location.
Yes, but that's a slightly different point with respect to Singleton. You're trying to say that the Blue NG site, the decision, should be distinguished from here because the whole of the borough was an AQMA.
In terms of its influence, yes.
But that actually simply makes the point that there wasn't anywhere else it could go in Ealing without affecting the AQMA.
Well,
if anything, that would have been a reason for saying, well, given there isn't anywhere else it can go, we're going to have to accept an impact upon the AQMA.
Well, if the proposal needed to be in Ealing, then that is correct.
So, on that basis, we can't actually say, can we, that the fact that the whole of Ealing is an AQMA gives us a reason for saying, well, Blue NG just isn't relevant here, it's a completely different situation.
Well, I think it does in terms of its impacts, which is the point I was making.
Right. Now, if we then look at what the inspector goes on to say, he tells us at the end of paragraph 10.3.2 that the evidence is concentrated on NO2 for the reasons he's explained. 10.3.2, very last sentence. Evidence is concentrated on NO2.
10.3.2. Sorry,
yep.
I was looking at 10.3.
Oh, sorry. It's one of those with multiple numbering.
10.3.2.
10.3.2.
Yes.
Yeah. And effectively, what he's telling us is it's NO2 we're going to be concerned about here for the purpose of the decision, which obviously is a comparability with the proposal here. And then he goes on to acknowledge, doesn't he, the advice in the then PPS 23 about not all applications inside or adjacent to AQMAs being refused if they result in deterioration of local air quality, because that could sterilise development.
Yes.
Yeah. And accepting the air quality is likely to be, but sorry, it goes on to say, accepted air quality is likely to be particularly important where granting planning permission would conflict with or render unworkable elements of a local authority's air quality action plan.
Yes.
And then he makes reference to, again, the MERS draft quality strategy, accepting the designation of an AQMA shouldn't halt all development. So he clearly has on board, doesn't he, this point about just because there's an AQMA, just because there's a deterioration, that can't be the end of all consideration, so to speak.
Yes.
Yep. And then, I think to be fair, he tells us in 10.3.7 that he's looked at, he gives us reference to what the sort of historical data has been, and about 6 lines down says, I don't consider the evidence indicates pollutant levels are falling, and indeed for the reasons he gives about the site's location, he says improving air quality is a challenge. So that's again the background that he's talking about.
And he tells us what the sources of the NO oxide are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, again, he then tells us in 10.3.8 that the effect of emissions on local air quality has been assessed using a recognised model, but any modelling process includes uncertainties. That obviously is again something that applies here, isn't it?
Well, I won't speak to the degree of uncertainty, that's Mr.
Right, okay. And interestingly, about halfway through the paragraph, he tells us that the technologies to be used, do you see that sentence?
Yes.
Technologies to be used are not in themselves new, but have not been used together in this way before, adding to uncertainty about emission levels. So that question of combination of technologies, which he says aren't new, but haven't been used in this way, is that something that would apply here?
Well, Mr. Owen has given you the...
yeah, I think that's really the point. Mr. Owen.
Well, I'm dealing with this because Mr. Singleton was really trying to
yes,
well,
yes, but I mean, we did look at the CD 150 a lot, yes,
but
I think that really is the point, Mr. Owen.
If I may just say so, the uncertainty that he's talking about here, I think is actually about emission levels, and bearing in mind that this was an appeal based on a resolution that the council would have refused on air quality impacts, not on perception.
And then
that's quite a significant difference.
The various sort of levels and both emission levels and background levels are discussed in 10.3.11, which the inspector can look at if necessary, which was probably Mr. Oakland's area. What we can also see, of course, is that the inspector took fully on board all the points that were being made about this again being a conservative assessment. Similar points to the points that are being made here. We see that in 10.3.12, don't we?
Sorry,
10.3.12. Worst case assumptions, 100% loading.
Yes.
The emission levels are likely to be about 25% lower for the reasons he gives there, and no account has been taken of reduction, the net reduction effect because of the net outcome because there was already already some emissions from boilers there, which is the point I dealt with this growth yesterday.
That's what the paragraph says, yes.
Okay. And then we can see in 10.3.14 he looks at the EPUC guidance and tells us that even if you accepted the sort of the worst sort of situation here, only one receptor would increase from slight adverse to moderate adverse. So again, we get a feel for the scale of the impacts there, don't we, Mr.
Yes.
And then again, 10.3.15, he tells us at the end of the paragraph, worst case assumptions have been made, but there's undoubted uncertainty in the modelling to be carried out. Makes the point that he accepts that none of the technical people who have expressed concerns, the EHO or the GLA expressed any concerns about health-related impacts. No policy or guidance specifically requires levels of deprivation to be taken into account. But he does note, doesn't he, that any increases are likely to result in health disbenefits.
Well, he does, but as I said yesterday, that judgment was made in the apparent absence of any advice from the HPA or the local health authority. So he didn't have the information which is available to this inspector.
Well, and he tells us that he considers that deprivation and effects on health should be considered. I don't think you'd actually disagree with that, would you?
No.
Okay. And then he takes on board that the air quality strategy indicates that standards represent levels at which no significant health effects would be expected in the population as a whole and are set purely with regard to scientific and medical evidence. So again, the sorts of points that are being put to this inspector he takes on board, doesn't he?
Yes, that's correct.
Now the bit that you then draw our attention to in 10.3.17 is that the 3 wards closest to the site are high on the most recent index of multiple deprivation.
Yes.
I consider that local residents might therefore suffer disproportionate health effects due to the proposal.
Yes.
So I think, first of all, what he's clearly saying is that he thinks that if you've got areas of multiple or high in respect of multiple deprivation, that residents there could suffer disproportionately.
Yes, certainly where those indices of deprivation suggest a low quality of health.
Yeah, okay. And again, presumably
that's an important factor.
You presumably wouldn't disagree with that.
No.
What actually we're not told anywhere, and I think that very helpfully the inspector, of course, has given us cross-references to where he's drawn those conclusions from. And I think if you go back to them, we're not told anywhere just what is meant by high on the most recent index of multiple deprivation. I think that's the phrase that's actually used by the witnesses, isn't it?
I don't think there's any data. There are various references to the economic conditions. There are references to health issues. There are references to other economic factors, but I don't think there's any set of data, for example.
Yeah, so we don't actually know what high means there.
No, but I do understand the reference to be, and it's repeated by a number of the participants in the inquiry, that it is 3 wards, and I think the nearest ward is referred to as being particularly problematical in terms of deprivation.
Well, I mean, again, this inspector really thinks it's important to go back to see where the source of that...
I think the points are being covered.
Yeah. I say, you can see what the source of that is, but having gone through it myself, I couldn't actually see anything said other than high on the most recent index. I think that's all it is.
As I say, the inference I drew yesterday was based on the repeated reference to these being within the worst in the country, and when that reference is used, it's normally used on the basis that they're in the 10%.
Well, you say that, but in fact there's nothing anywhere that tells us that's the case. No. And I don't think it's something you've looked at, have you?
I haven't checked that, no.
And then we've got the bit that Mr. Watson has drawn our attention to, where the inspector, and indeed I think you dealt with, not a run-of-the-mill scheme, and the inspector drew attention to the volume of NOx.
Indeed, again, I'm not sure what a run-of-the-mill scheme would be in waste or energy.
Then you obviously can't help it. Again, he's making the point in the next paragraph, 10.3.19, best-in-class technology, SCR would be used, process wouldn't be operated if it failed, the facility would be controlled under the environmental permitting regime.
Yes.
Which again he'd be assuming would work.
I assume so.
And indeed he then does actually acknowledge at the bottom of the page in 10.3.22 that there is some justification in citing the proposal on the appeal side.
I think that's a co-location benefit.
Yeah. So all of these points that are made about it being a modern proposal and it being properly controlled and that sort of thing, they were all matters that, well, if the inspector was doing his job, you'd have expected to be in his mind anyway. But they're all matters which he actually clearly tells us would in his mind.
Yes.
And that doesn't change him coming to the conclusion that we see him set out in 10.3.23, does it?
Well, it informs his conclusion that there are actual air quality impacts and therefore actual harm. And that's the basis on which the appeal is dismissed in relation to those matters.
Yeah, well, he dismisses on the basis that some absolute levels would be 50% above the limit values, little evidence of existing levels falling, many people would be affected in the deprived area that already has a shorter life expectancy than elsewhere in the borough.
Yes, but the inspector is addressing himself to actual harm, not perception of risk.
So, when we look at that, Mr. Singleton, it does seem to be the case, doesn't it, that the factors that are being argued in favour of why there's no sensible ground for people to have concerns in this case were all factors that were being taken on board by the inspector in that case, weren't they?
Well, the considerations were taken, but as I set out for the inspector yesterday, in very different circumstances.
Right. Now, 250 metres and the waste plan, Mr. Singleton. Can I just understand what your position is? Is your position that if in actual fact a waste disposal facility is proposed, we don't have to worry about anything that's beyond 250 metres away from it because it'll be okay?
No.
So it isn't your position that the impacts on the wider area beyond 250 metres from a waste facility don't require consideration?
No, they do require consideration. My point is a very simple one, that the waste plan, which is the major document, the only document that seeks to address the waste management needs of the 10 districts, takes as a fundamental factor in its approach to whether or not a site is suitable a 250 metre cut-off. And I think the only conclusion you can draw from that is that as a matter of principle, as we looked at in the report on the West Sussex plan this morning, as a matter of principle, waste management facilities are unlikely to cause problems if they are 250 metres or more from the nearest residential. That's the point that I'm making. That's a fundamental aspect of that plan.
Well, I don't think the plan tells us that anywhere that they're not going to cause problems beyond 250 metres, or even unlikely to, does it?
But it doesn't tell us that, but that is, as I say, that is a key criteria in the site selection process and in the sustainability appraisal.
Well, it's a sieving process, effectively, isn't it?
Well, it's a sieving process, but it's also part of the sustainability appraisal, and the inspector will be fully aware and conversant with what the sustainability appraisal does, what its purpose is in terms of assessing the soundness of the plan.
And we know, for example, because we looked at it yesterday, and I don't think we need to go back to it, but we know, for example, that the waste plan would require us to look at the core strategy, which would require us to look at policy L6.
Yes.
And that policy L6.3 would require us to look at the environmental, social, and other impacts.
Other factors including factors such as co-location.
Yeah.
Yes. It's one of the number of factors.
Yes. Which, of course, again, are not limited to within 250 metres of the site.
No.
So, whilst I can understand you wanting the inspector to bear this in mind, Mr. Singleton, in actual fact it doesn't remove the need to carry out an assessment on a site-by-site basis of what the implications of the proposal are, does it?
No, but it gives us a very strong indication of what the local authority's approach is in terms of what is a minimum desirable distance between waste facilities and residential property, and that is the 250 metres.
And indeed, the reference to 250 metres in the plan itself is in the context, as you explained, of a safeguarding policy.
Yes, policy.
And the problem with the safeguarding policy is that the wider you draw it, the more you're in danger of sterilising the area within the safeguard, or the more you're in danger of sterilising a wide area within the safeguarding policy, aren't you?
Not necessarily, because what the safeguarding policy is doing is requiring that local planning authorities consult those who are the custodians of the waste plan as to whether or not the proposals that they have in front of them are likely to frustrate the deliverability of the waste plan. I think that's what the purpose of the policy is. Now, if they wanted to say, well, 500 is the real issue, the real distance within which we expect significant issues to arise, that option was clearly open to them to do so. But they didn't.
Sorry, there was another point on Blue NG I did need to ask you about. It's your Appendix B, Mr. Singleton, of your rebuttal appendices.
Appendix
B.
B.
First point I think we just have to be aware of is this, Mr. Singleton, that if we compare your OS plan for Barton with your OS plan for Southall, there are different scales, aren't they?
Well, they are, yes, because of the nature of the area.
Yeah.
Slightly different. I can't. One's a 20. Well, they've been done to fit onto an A4 print. I mean,
well, whatever the reason for it, we just have to bear that in mind.
They are different scales, but clearly the distance is shown in terms of the different circles is correct. So I don't think the scale is particularly important in understanding.
I'm assuming those distances. I haven't tried to scale them off myself.
Well, then,
but I'm assuming that those distances are correct.
They are computer generated, and they are what are used as to generate all radius plans that are used in retail inquiries up and down the country. I've not heard them challenged before.
I'm assuming they're correct.
So I put a lot of trust in their accuracy.
But we just have to bear in mind that we can't directly compare one plan with the other because they are different scales. What you can do is look at this.
Well, I think you can compare for that reason.
Can I just understand what's been done in Appendix B2? Has this all been done by Pitney Bowes for you? Or?
Well, we have a license with Pitney Bowes.
Right. So you've done it yourself.
That allows us, my information colleagues in my London office can access the system, set in the parameters that they want to download the information, and then download the information.
Yeah,
but it's all Pitney Bowes information. It's not ours.
Yep. Right. Okay. I understand that. It's their information, and you've used their software effectively.
Yes.
It's just
right.
I'm sure you've done it properly, lawfully.
I'm sure I have. Yes.
And you put in then some parameters into it as to what you wanted to answer.
It's explained in its own terms. Really, you put in a grid reference effectively as the centre point on which you want to base the 500 1 kilometre and 2 kilometre circles.
So what you've then done, if we just look at the Barton plan as an example.
Barton plan.
The Barton plan as an example. What I think you've done, if you're telling me, is you've looked at 500 metres, 1,000 and 2 kilometres.
Yes. And
you've basically interrogated the system to say within the point grid reference where the star is effectively,
yes,
how many of the various categories are there within that distance?
But yes, I mean it generates population information, so the numbers and the profile information that's in the report.
Now, I mean the Pitney Bowes information, I'm assuming is probably originally built up from, is it the super output areas in a sense?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah.
It's generated from super output.
Because
you can break it down, you break it down into postcodes and other classifications to break down a zone.
The thing we've got to bear in mind is that it's still having to do some form of extrapolation itself, because there won't have anywhere been a survey that demonstrates just what is the population within that particular thing.
No, there are limitations on that model as there are on other zones. Yes.
So there'll be that limitation both on the total population and also then how it's broken down.
Yes.
Okay. Been about half an hour, Mr. Fraser.
Oh, I am sorry.
We are quite a long way over 4 hours now.
I think we're almost up to 5, so yeah. So,
yeah.
I won't be much longer, I hope so. Yes. Port Salford, you were telling us, is a trimodal facility.
Have we finished?
Yes, we have. Port Salford,
yes,
you told us, is a trimodal strategic facility. And the tri-modes are the ship canal, the railway, and the motorway, effectively, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, it's not a direct access to the motorway in terms of when the proposal is being consented, but yes, the intention is to get traffic onto the motorway as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So that obviously is quite a limiting factor as to location.
I said it is. I think I said that in the statement.
And also, another big limiting factor elsewhere will be the presence of the green belt, won't it, Mr. Singleton?
Well, indeed. Well, in this location, will yes.
Yeah. Well, indeed, I think one of the issues people were raising at the core strategy hearing, which now, of course, is not going anywhere, was they wanted more land released out of the green belt to expand Port Salford.
Yes, as you know, I've not been party, although my company's been working on that. I've not personally been involved in Salford core strategy, but my understanding is that what is being promoted there is an extension of Port Salford over and above that which is already consented. So certainly that would apply if you want to extend the facility there. Then the green belt issues come into play. But I don't think they did in relation to the original proposal.
Right, just bear with me a moment, Mr. Singleton. I think I've probably covered the points that you raised yesterday. I'll just check.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Mr. Cummington.
Well, so I can say this, that the two principal areas on which I intended to ask questions were in relation to the waste hierarchy. You expect that.
The waste
hierarchy.
Yes,
And the CHP point, which Mr. Fraser asked questions at the end of the day yesterday, because those are clearly both critical to the Breed Clean Air Group. Now, because they have been addressed at such length, I'm in the fortunate position of not having to revisit that. Save for, I'm saying this just so you can have a time estimation, save for I do have a couple of questions about CD80, and I have a couple of questions about two other points. So I think my preface to my questions are almost as long as my questions.
Sure.
I don't intend to take more than about 10 minutes.
I want to give you a fair crack with the whip, Mr. Cunnington. So
No, I quite anticipate that, but simply to say that I think we can now make up some time. Now,
thank you.
Mr. Singleton, could I invite you to go to core document 80?
80.
Yes, please.
Yes.
This is, as you recall, is the DEFRA document from July 2012.
Yes. You'll have to bear with me, it's right at the bottom of the file. And my spring clips are starting to open on their own accord now. Yes, this is the, 80 is the landfill restrictions, hold for evidence.
Yes, and
yes.
A couple of hours ago,
Is he saying that?
you agreed with Mr. Fraser that if we go to page 8.
Page 8.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. You forget. Yes, page 8, Mr. Cunt.
I don't think we're going to disagree about this, but the information or the data that's contained in figure 3.
Figure 3, yeah.
You agreed, Mr. Fraser, that this is the most up-to-date.
Yes, this is the 0.6 figure, isn't it? 0.6 million.
And
yeah.
We certainly agree on this, that you're not asking the inspector to reject the DEFRA figures and data contained in this table, are you?
No, the inspector will be able to see the table. I just note that it says underneath the table that data for 2011 is provisional. I'm not sure I fully understand what that means, but I just note that it does say that. But no, that represents the picture that I think Mr. Watson put to the inquiry. And
if you look at the top of the page,
yes,
our most recent analysis,
yep.
figure 3, shows approximately 0.6
going to landfill, yes.
And that's offered without any caveat as to its reliability, isn't it?
Yes.
And you make reference in the appendices to which you were taken to a number of journal articles, which
yes.
may be internet journal articles.
Yes.
Now, I hear what you say about not asking the inspector to reject the DEFRA figures, but it's also this case of the articles to which you make reference in this document. As to the document to which greatest weight should be attached, it's the DEFRA document, isn't it?
Well, yes, I think that's probably, I've already agreed with Mr. Fraser, there is no new data in those articles, they don't rely upon any new data. And obviously this is an official source from a government agency, so the inspector will treat it in that way.
Yes, so
yes.
Of all the data available to the inspector, the one to which greatest weight should be attached is that contained in the DEFRA.
Well, the basis is the most up-to-date picture, with all the caveats that I've made about that this morning. Yes.
That's all on that document. Now, the second document, and I can promise you I don't intend to revisit this at any great length, to which I'd like to take you, is an Appendix 3 to your first proof.
To the main proof?
Yes, please.
Yes, right. This is the murder of...
It's the Hetherington letter from the 11th
yes.
of September 2012.
Yes, I have that.
Now, you were asked in considerable detail about the substance of the document.
Yes.
And to some extent about its character, but the questions I have simply are about its character, because at the outset of your evidence on this letter, you had an exchange with Mr. Fraser, which you may recall, in which you said that the document wasn't produced with a closed mind. Do you recall that?
Well, I said I didn't think there was an indication that it was. I thought that was the implication of Mr. Fraser's question. I didn't see that in this letter.
And then you were asked questions about the merits of, in effect, a comparative exercise between a baseline assessment
yes.
and an afterwards assessment, if you like. Now, two questions.
That's an interesting departure.
If it goes on, then somebody else to refrain. I'm going to have a coffee then.
Come on, a Liverpool man. Get out there.
Sorry, Mr. Clinton.
Not at all. Now, two questions. The first, the reason why you were put to that explanation as to the justification for no reference to a baseline assessment
yes.
is straightforwardly because Mr. Hetherington doesn't choose to give one.
Doesn't
choose to give an explanation as to why he doesn't make a baseline
he hasn't
assessment.
chosen to give one. I suspect there was a timescale implication. You can see the date of the letter.
And now help me with this as well, because what you often expect to find in a letter of this sort that's been solicited for the purposes of evidence in respect of an application or an appeal is a person who purports to have expert knowledge in a relevant field, giving a range of opinion and explaining why he prefers to take a stance at one point of the range rather than another, don't you?
Well, I think that would be true of an expert report going into a court or tribunal case. I'm not sure that rigour would be applied to this advice, but yes, I understand the point you're making.
Because, just to play out the point, if you like, I know you're there, but we don't find that in Mr. Hetherington's letter, do we?
No. No.
And you can see why, therefore, there may be some force to the criticism, other than, or in addition to the questions asked you by Mr. Fraser, as to why a member of the public reading that letter might perceive that it had been produced with a closed mind.
Well, I can see that a member of the public might draw that conclusion, yes.
And one final point. I'm conscious that of what you said to Mr. Fraser in response to the first question after the luncheon adjournment in relation to your comment in relation to the Bolton Incinerator.
Yeah.
But it would be fair to say that the evidence that you gave at that point in relation to the Bolton Incinerator, rather than exercising perhaps your faculties as an expert witness, that was anecdotal evidence.
Yes, yes, that's fair.
And so if I were to say to you that within the last 12 months in the Bolton News there have been reports which articulate public concern about the Bolton Incinerator, you wouldn't disagree with me?
Well, you'd be giving quite a lot of evidence, Mr. Cunnington, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know whether this witness agrees with me or not.
Well, he may or may not. We just need to know that you're giving the evidence.
I haven't seen the information you referred to, so I can't comment on it.
And the incinerator is in the Great Lever Ward, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
And do you, or have you undertaken any research in relation to the public concern at the infant mortality rates in the Great Lever Ward in relation to the rest of Bolton?
Well, again, I think you're perhaps straying a little bit into implied evidence of these.
Well, I'm just asking if this witness
Well,
who
think I said,
spoke to...
Sorry, Mr. Fraser, I've answered your question. The comments I made in relation to that anecdote.
I don't know the answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunnington. In that case, Mr. Kingston, re-examination, please.
Mr. Singleton, you need first of all Mrs. Harding's proof of evidence.
Yes.
And if you would, page 14.
Yes.
Paragraph 5.4.7.
Yes.
Mr. Richards,
Yeah.
could I make a point of information here, given what I've heard so far? I have an 11-word observation. Can we establish if Mr. Singleton attended the planning committee meeting in November last year?
Well, no, I don't think that's a question that you can put from the floor. And I would like to
Thank you.
carry on with the re-examination, please.
Thank you. Then we're looking at Mrs. Harding's proof of evidence, paragraph 5.4.7.
Yes.
Do you see the last sentence?
I do.
What does it say, please?
This is Mrs. Harding's evidence. Whilst the appeal site is not explicitly located in any specific spatial profile area, it sits in between the defined areas of Trafford Park and Hurst.
Does that seem at all ambiguous to you?
No.
Have a look at the statement of common ground, please, page 33. paragraph 823.
Yes, that's fine.
You can see what the paragraph says. You don't
Yes.
need to read it. Is there any material difference between what was agreed in the statement of common ground and what's in Mrs. Harding's evidence?
Not in my opinion, no.
Thank you. You don't need that for the moment. You were asked about the report to committee and the way in which the report to committee addressed the waste plan. Do you recollect?
I do, yes.
And in particular about paragraph 19. If you
Yes.
need to turn it up, please do so. But by now,
I have it
think
in the
there's
same volume, so I'll
excellent.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
What I want to ask you about is the advice which was received from the GMGU
Yes.
with regard to the weight to be accorded to the waste plan at the point at which this application was being determined in November
Yes.
of last year. Do you have that?
Yes. That's the reference I went to yesterday
Yes.
in my evidence to the chief.
And which
Yes.
drew on paragraph 18 of the planning principles
Yes.
document.
Yes, that's correct.
May I have your view, please? Mr. Fraser's drawn to your attention paragraph 19 of the report to committee. But what's your view, please, as to whether or not the GMGU advice was correct or not as to the position with regard to the waste plan as at the date of determination of this application?
The view expressed by GMGU, in my opinion, is the correct view with reference to the general principles document.
You next need to have to hand a copy of the planning inspector's guidance, procedural guidance, relating to planning appeals and called-in planning applications. In case you don't happen to have it with you, here's one I made earlier. This is guidance that will be very familiar to the inspector.
Yes.
But it's necessary in the light of the way the cross-examination proceeded just to take up one or two references to it. I'd like you to go, please, to paragraph 4.4.2.
Yes.
Which should be, there are a number of core principles.
Yes.
A number of core principles which underpin the operation of a well-functioning appeal system. These are, what does the first bullet point say with regard to ensuring clarity of issues?
It reads the critical importance of regular and continuing dialogue between the main parties to an appeal to ensure clarity of issues between them and that there are no surprises.
And the third bullet point is one which is familiar with regard to reasons for refusal.
Yes, the
inspector will be familiar with it.
Yes.
The last sentence deals particularly with where elected members differ.
Yes.
Does it tell us that where the elected member's decision differs from that recommended by their officers, it's essential that the reasons for doing so are similarly clear, precise and comprehensive?
That's correct, yes.
And the penultimate bullet point, what does that tell us about local planning authorities in that case, please?
The local planning authorities should be confident in their ability to defend decisions on the basis of their reasons for refusal, and the appellants confident in the strength of their case at the time of the appeal.
Just pausing there in relation to, as it were, that bit of the guidance, what do you say about the suggestion from Mr. Fraser, at times implied, and at other times expressed, that we arrive at this inquiry with the Inspector and Secretary of State with some sort of roving inquiry around the policies, irrespective of what's in the reason for refusal?
Well, I think that's the point I've made in both my written evidence and oral evidence, that there was every opportunity in the decision notice to express the reasons with reference to the policies in the emerging plan. That was not taken. There was every opportunity for the Council in its Rule 6 to set out any suggested or alleged conflict, and it did not do so. And it seems to me the approach taken here is contrary to that advice that we just had.
Thank you. Go to paragraph or section 6.6, would you please, of the same guidance, which
6.6.
is 6.6, which is the section dealing under the heading Inquiries Procedure in
Yes.
section 6 as a whole, with the statement of common ground.
Yes.
What does the first sentence say, please, with regard to the statement of common ground?
So the statement of common ground is essential to ensure that the evidence at an inquiry focuses on the material differences between the main parties.
Same question. What's your view, please, about any suggestion that the procedure here should be, as it were, a roving inquiry by the Inspector and Secretary of State, irrespective of the local planning authority's case?
Oh, so that would be a significant departure from this guidance.
Go, would you please, to section 6.7, statement of case.
Yes.
Paragraph 6.7.2. Read the first two sentences, please.
The statement of case should contain the full particulars of the case which a party proposes to put forward at the inquiry.
And the next sentence?
It should set out both the planning and legal arguments that a party intends to put forward at an inquiry and describe but not contain the evidence.
Same question, Mr. Singleton. In the light of that advice, what do you say about the suggestion that the authority can engage, in effect, on some roving inquiry with regard to any policy which the Secretary of State might think is relevant?
Well, again, sir, I'd say that's directly contrary to the guidance in this document.
Thank you. Take up the statement of common ground, would you please?
Yes.
You were cross-examined for approximately an hour and a half on points which related to the supply of waste wood.
Yes.
And were introduced and concluded by reference to the waste hierarchy. Do you recollect that?
I do.
Go, would you, in the statement of common ground to page 31?
31.
Yes.
Yes.
At page 31, we can see paragraphs 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yes.
Refer to regional spatial strategy policies EM 10, 11, 12, and 15.
Yes.
And paragraph 8.12 tells us that the appeal proposals are compliant with the RSS policies.
Yes.
See that?
That is agreed, yes.
Take up core document 63, would you please? That's the regional strategy.
Yes, I have that.
Go, would you please? I'm not going to go through all of the policies because we've been through them once already, but just one will do for these purposes. Go, would you please, to page 105 and policy EM11.
Yes, I have that.
Do you see the opening paragraph of the policy?
Yes.
And the second sentence, such residual waste as does arise should be managed at the highest practicable level in the government's waste hierarchy, the following sequence and so on.
Yes.
This is, as it were, the waste hierarchy policy. Does the statement of common ground indicate any conflict with it whatsoever?
To the contrary, it says that we are compliant. The proposals are compliant with this policy.
The statement of common ground was completed on the 19th of September 2012, is that right?
Was, yes.
But was that after the DEFRA paper in July of 2012?
Yes.
Was there every opportunity, or was there any opportunity for the Council to say we don't agree that you comply with the waste hierarchy?
Yes. Yes, I mean the Council, as we've said, this is a statement of common ground. It is open for either party to sign or not sign to what is agreed or not agreed. So this is an agreed document.
We'll also deal with another point which arises because after that a substantial amount of time was taken cross-examining you, and indeed before it, with regard to CHP
yes.
and energy efficiency and whether or not you were going to comply with policy L8.
Policy 8 in the
policy 8 in the waste plan.
Yes.
While you've got the regional strategy open, can you go to policy EM15, please? Which
15.
15, which you'll find.
Yes, framework.
That's page 113.
Yes.
This is a framework for sustainable energy in the northwest.
Yes.
It tells us that plans and strategies should promote sustainable energy production and consumption in accordance with the principles of the energy hierarchy set out in Figure 9.2 and within the Sustainable Energy Strategy. In line with the Northwest Sustainable Energy Strategy, the Northwest aims to double its installed combined heat and power capacity by 2010 if economic conditions are feasible.
Yes.
And then a reference to public authorities. Is there any complaint about lack of compliance with this policy?
No.
With regard to the waste plan and its policy and as addressed in the Statement of Common Ground, can you go to page 40, please?
For
40 of the
40,
Statement
yes.
of Common Ground.
Yeah. I have that.
Paragraph 853, please.
3. Yes. Yes.
The plan, that is the waste
The
plan,
waste plan.
sets out a number of development management policies that will be used to assess planning applications for waste management. Policy 8 expects waste management facilities which propose energy from waste-fired technologies to have the potential to provide combined heat and power unless it's proved to be unfeasible.
Yes.
That is an agreed statement.
It is.
Is there any indication of any conflict with the policy?
No.
Is there any indication of anything beyond the requirement to have the potential to provide combined heat and power?
Not in that agreed statement, no.
Thank you. You can put that to one side for the purpose. We then need to deal with the DEFRA report, which is core document 8.
8.
We have been up and down the figures and round and round what the tonnage might be of waste wood which is available. But would you go to the executive summary, please?
Yes.
This document, page 1.
Yes, I have that.
And go to the third paragraph, please.
Yes.
The opening sentence says, the data on wood waste, particularly on the amount going to landfill or informal markets, is not clear.
It does. I made reference to that.
Is that consistent or inconsistent with your own view?
That is consistent with my own view as informed by the evidence that I've submitted. And I think I did make reference to this when we were looking at this paper.
Yes.
This document earlier on.
And as to what the government seeks to achieve by the call for evidence, look at the first paragraph at the top of the executive summary, would you please?
Yes.
In the second sentence, this call for evidence invites views and information on the sustainable management of wood waste and measures to divert wood waste from landfill where this is the best environmental option. What's this call for evidence driven by, please?
Well, it's a call for evidence, as it says in its heading. It's in assessing whether or not additional restrictions ought to be introduced to prevent, I think entirely, as one option, any waste wood going to landfill.
Go to the fourth paragraph, would you, of the executive summary?
The one beginning our analysis.
Our analysis,
yes.
From the third line, and the sentence in the third line, to drive greater diversion of wood waste.
Yes.
What do you see as the overall government objective with regard to the policies that are being adopted here?
Well, I think the clear drive is that the government is seeking to achieve the most sustainable route of disposal, reuse, recovery for all elements of the wastewater stream. It's seeking the most sustainable option and having to explore all the different factors that will affect what that option or those range of options might be.
Yes, and when we look at the second page of the document,
yes,
it says in the box in the middle of the page, we have set out areas where we're particularly keen to receive evidence.
yes,
If there are other areas and so on.
yes.
Just turn on, would you then please, to page 8.
Yes.
And on page 8, do you see the questions at the bottom of the page?
Yes.
The first question in this box, question 3, do you agree that approximately 0.6 million tonnes of wood waste is going to landfill in England?
Yes.
Is that question being asked because the government has adequate information with regard to the amount of wood waste
I think it's
going
being asked.
to landfill?
I think it's being asked because the picture is unclear.
Do you see question 4?
Yes.
Do you agree that wood waste is going to informal markets?
Yes.
If, as the government appears to be postulating, there are informal markets operating, what, if anything, is that to do with the reliability of statistical information which might currently be available?
Well, I think that reinforces the point that the data is unreliable.
And question 5, what other sources of evidence on A, wood waste arising to B, wood waste management routes are there? This is a call for evidence, asking what other evidence there might be.
Yes.
What, in your view, if anything, does that tell us about the government's current state of knowledge on these matters?
It's a clear indication that the state of knowledge and government DEFRA and its various components is incomplete in a number of different respects.
Go, would you then, to page 14?
Yes.
And on page 14, future energy recovery capacity. Do you see that?
Yes.
The first sentence of paragraph 50, as the main market for wood waste driven out of landfill is likely to be wood compliant biomass power plant, we've looked at future development. At present, one of the main drivers for the development of wood compliant biomass plants is the current financial incentives that are available for renewable electricity generation under the renewables obligation.
Yes.
But as to the main market being wood compliant biomass power plant, how does this facility fit into that overall picture? Is it a wood compliant biomass plant as proposed?
Yes.
Go, would you then to page 15?
Yes.
And on page 15, do you see the questions there in the box?
Yes, question 6.
Well, actually, we ought just to look at 53 above.
Right.
We understand the bulk of wood that's currently sent to landfill to be low-grade wood, B, C and D.
Yes.
Grade B can be used in panel board, but grade C can only be used in wood-compliant plant. It may well be that the main viable market for this wood waste, if a restriction on landfilling were imposed, would be incineration for energy recovery in a wood-compliant plant. Additionally, if there's a lot of hazardous wood waste diverted from landfill, some of the future capacity for incineration would need to be permitted to deal with this.
Yes.
What's that telling us relevant to our proposal with regard to availability of lower grade wood and the best place for it to go in terms of getting value out of it?
Well, it's confirming the position that the majority of the wastewater stream that is going to landfill is in the lower grade categories, and that is exactly the kind of wood which is suitable for use in a wood compliant facility.
And in the questions box, do you see question 7? Is it likely that export supply will
Yes.
be diverted to UK facilities?
Yes.
What, if anything, does that imply with regard to waste wood currently being exported?
Well, it confirms again the point that I talked about this morning, that if there was a reliable UK market that could use that element of waste wood, then it wouldn't be necessary to, or it might not be necessary to export.
Thank you. Go to page 16.
Yes.
Paragraph 57.
Yes.
Which tells us, however, the quantity of wood landfilled also depends on the amount of wood waste which arises, and therefore depends on the waste output from the relevant sectors. We do not have a quantitative projection of wood waste arising in the future, but it's clear from Table 2 that developments in C and D, construction, demolition, packaging, pallet sector could have a significant impact in reducing overall arisings. As noted in Table 2, these sources have declined since 2007, like a result of the recession, policy and other changes. These sectors could increase their landfilling, but higher recovery rates from waste prevention activities should mitigate this risk. You told us that you thought the economy might be having, I think, two effects. You told us, Mr. Fraser. One, currently reducing the amount of waste wood that might be available, but two, as the economy picked up, increasing it.
Yes.
Is this paragraph, does it fit or not with your approach to the effect of the economy on waste wood supplies?
I think it's fully consistent with what I said.
Now, just before we leave this document, we just need to go back to the table that Mr. Kyneton asked you about, which is on page 8, I beg your pardon, figure
3.
Figure 3.
Yes.
You drew attention to the fact that the source at the bottom says data for 2011 is provisional.
Yes.
But do you see the box where it's got the key, as it were, the pecked line for wood fraction of mixed waste? What does it say about that?
It says that is estimated, yes.
Yeah.
That's very clear, yes.
Right, well...
And the darker green is total segregated. So it's making a clear distinction.
Right, well we can see, and the inspector I think will have got enough of a flavour of that document from the various references we've had, but just let's see the extent to which the flavour we've picked up from that document is then coincident with what has been agreed as the statement of common ground. Take out the statement of common ground, would you, again, and go to page 23. On page 23 is an agreed paragraph, 7.9. See there?
Yes.
It tells us that whilst biomass is only just emerging as a realistic means of delivering clean, renewable heat and energy in the UK, the strategy, that is, in this instance, the UK biomass strategy, the strategy actively encourages the development of biomass plants to enable this market to grow. The strategy recognises that demand for biomass fuel will stimulate an increase in its supply and availability, opening up supply lines which are currently not well developed. Consequently, this will enable the biomass market to develop further, maximising its ability to contribute to meeting international targets and government objectives relating to carbon emissions and renewable energy generation. What's set out there in that agreed paragraph, how do you say consistent or not consistent with the overall tenor of what we've seen with regard to waste wood and the statistical information picked up from the DEFRA report we've just referred to?
Again, that's fully consistent.
You then need to take up, please, your supplementary appendices.
Rebuttal.
Yes, I beg your pardon. The rebuttal is correct description. read through them. The inspector can read them. I'm not going to go through them in detail. I just want to pick up, if I may please, some points which didn't quite emerge from what you were asked about them. The first one is 21st September 2012.
Yes.
So, as it were, reasonably up to date. On the first page of that article, above the subheading emissions, you see a paragraph where Mr. Martin is continuing his comments.
Yes.
He says, having referred to what's happening elsewhere, this will create significant demand for virgin wood pellets and not recovered wood, unless it's grade A clean material. From that point of view, it's not really the news we wanted. The outlook is not positive. What, if any, is the relevance of that from our point of view, please?
Well, it's not directly relevant because the plant that we're proposing would be using the lower grade.
But from the point of view of here, Mr. Martin is the procurement manager, but in terms of recovered wood,
yes,
we're told that this will create significant demand for virgin wood pellets,
yes,
and not recovered wood.
Yes, so there is. What he's saying is there is no market for the other grades of low recovered wood.
Thank you.
So it's the continuation of the same point.
Go to the second paper, would you please, 13th of January 2012, and this just has a chime with the question we saw earlier, question 7 from the DEFRA paper.
Yes.
If as we're told in the first paragraph under the emboldened heading,
yes,
since January 2011, the company, that is Stobbart, has been using the port in East Sussex to export large quantities of waste wood to Scandinavia for use in producing power. If large quantities of waste wood are being exported, what does that tell you about either the demand for it or the availability of plants to burn it in the UK?
Well, it tells you that there is an inadequate demand and an uncertain market in the UK, which would allow that wood to be used within the UK.
And now have your view, please, as it were, an overview. What do you say about the sustainability of that? And that is taking a bulky material like waste wood and shipping it overseas in this way?
Well, on any definition, it's wholly unsustainable, and it also is unhelpful in terms of the government's achieving its objectives for renewable energy. If a potential supply is being exported to another country.
And then your final document in that appendix, Piers Grove waste wood mounting. There's a picture on the first page.
Yes.
With a bit of text under the picture. What does it say?
I think I drew attention to this previously, but many wood recyclers have been forced to stockpile waste wood in their yards due to a collapse in demand for lower grade material.
And in terms over the page, perhaps actually the bit that's top of the top of the next page, there's a reference at the top of the next page to export material again.
Yes.
In preparation for the coming winter. Wood recyclers are desperately hoping for a cold winter and an upturn in the economy to really turn the situation around.
Yes.
Export, we've seen earlier, to Scandinavia, yes?
Yes.
Any indications anywhere in that part of this article, or indeed anywhere else, that there is some crisis with regard to the availability of waste wood in the United Kingdom?
No, this information and the other evidence we looked at demonstrates that there is a current problem in finding appropriate uses for that waste wood. And
then, with wood recyclers in mind, go to your Appendix G, would you please? which is a letter from Hadfield
Yes.
Wood Recyclers. Yes.
Yes.
We had an interesting debate about the language used
Yes.
here, but look at the penultimate paragraph, would you please?
Yes.
A thriving biomass energy sector is vital if we're to maximise our ability to bring as much waste wood material as possible back into use, particularly grades of material that do not have a ready market elsewhere, be this grade C material which cannot be reused in the manufacture of board products, or grade B material for which there may be no ready demand within the region and which may be uncompetitive to transport elsewhere. When we see the reference to grade B material for which there may be no ready demand within the region,
Yes.
what's being talked about there? The inappropriate use of grade B material in the generation of energy, or the use of grade B material which would otherwise end up in a landfill?
Well, exactly that. It's not talking about the inappropriate use. It's talking about a material which, if the waste hierarchy could be applied without any reference to practicalities, should not go to landfill. But where there is no market, is likely to end up in landfill. And that is a significant part of the existing problem with the immaturity of the market.
Yes. Then, if you would, the AEA report in your Appendix D.
Yes.
You were asked questions about a number of different parts of this report. But first of all, just as a generality, please, we see it's prepared by AEA.
Yes.
To what extent, if at all, would you invite the inspector to consider AEA as being an informed reporter on these matters, having regard to what we've been told about their contributions to other work being undertaken by DEFRA?
Well, I think, sir, it's entirely fair to conclude that they are a very well-informed consultancy who not only recently but have for a long time been involved in contributing to information, research and the development of intelligence in this sector.
And the table we see is Table 4, comparison of landfill waste wood data sources.
Table 4.
Table 4 on page 13.
Yes.
You drew attention to the wide variation
Yes.
in the figures for waste wood. The most recent DEFRA paper, which we've now seen the context for the figures in it, that is, that the figures aren't clear. DEFRA 2012 was given as 4.3, but we know which one that is.
Yes.
Given that the figures are, on DEFRA's own admission, not clear, is there, on current evidence, any basis for plumping for a particular figure and saying, well, it's the most recent, it must be the most accurate?
No, I think all the figures are affected by the uncertainties and the reliability of data in the same way and to the same degree.
And then if you would go to the conclusions of that report.
Yes.
And in the conclusions, paragraph 60, you were taken to the first bullet point that go to the penultimate and the final ones, would you please, where the question was, how do AEA see the development of the market and the quantities of waste wood fractions which will ultimately fuel a plant such as this? What was the answer, please?
It confirms that the market for waste wood is immature. It's currently being influenced by the recession, by the closure of the Sonai panel board plant and potential changes in government policy. And the market for low-grade waste wood is not well understood. This grade of waste wood is currently in far less demand than the cleaner fractions of the waste wood.
And the last bullet point, what are the drivers for the market for waste wood in relation to fuel supply in North West and wider UK? They tell us we believe there are no or few market drivers for recovery of low-grade waste wood at present. The current lack of market for this product means there's little reason to recover it.
Yes.
In our 2012 report for DEFRA, we stated that the only appropriate market that we'd identified for this grade of waste wood is energy recovery, but there are a few plants compliant with emissions regulation under WID that are capable of taking low-grade waste wood at present. The proposed Barton plant is likely to provide a local market driver for this grade of waste wood, and we believe it's likely that wood waste aggregators will react to this driver by taking in more of this grade of waste wood.
Yes.
Is that consistent or inconsistent with the point I referred you to earlier from the Statement of Common Ground of paragraph 7.9 about the market development and the consequences as a result of this proposal?
Again, I think that's fully consistent with what is said in the strategy report.
So if we look to see then, Mr. Singleton, whether as between the expert evidence available from AEA and the position agreed with the Council,
yes,
there's any difference. Is there any difference?
I don't think there's any difference at all.
One of the things that we know has happened in this instance is that GMGU have not only been consulted once but twice on the application. We know in addition that they've been contacted by the Council's planning consultant in order to discuss the proposal.
Yes, yes. In the run to the inquiry, yes.
In terms of locally, the best informed source with regard to the quantities of waste arising and therefore whether there might be the quantity of waste wood referred to available, who would you say locally, in terms of an independent public body, is the best informed source with regard to waste wood arising?
I think there's no doubt that would be the MTU.
And do we see, in any representation from them, any breadth of an indication that there would not be sufficient waste wood and or there might be a conflict with the waste hierarchy?
No, neither of those have ever been raised as a concern.
Thank you. Well, that's enough of that excitement about the waste wood market. Now we need to look just at one or two of the questions you were asked about the economic factors. And I see
just I'm just trying to be helpful, sir. Just whilst we have that matter in front of us, you'll recall on Appendix F there was a missing line, which Mr. Singleton was going to check on for us. I think we managed to check it. I don't know if you can help if I just tell you what it says.
By all means do, but I'm going to ask that it's reprinted. And
well, that's very. I just do it whilst Mr. Singleton's here in case he wants me to say anything, or whether Mr. Kingston wants to say anything on it. But I don't mind.
Okay, well, I will just read it out.
I'm told what it should be, sir, is whilst it is understood that some larger companies like Stobart and Cito UK are just beginning, and then it would be to export. So that's what it says.
Okay.
Thank you.
So can I have a
we'll give you. I'm very sorry that
I have seen the original. I can't recall.
Yeah, no, it looks like a printer malfunction.
Yes, it is. When you print it this many, so unfortunately it's just
yes.
repeated.
Yes, and consistent.
Yeah.
Right, we need to go to Ernst and just one or two questions about the economic position there. Do you want to finish reassembling the fat?
On the floor, and I hope you're not going back to it. Where am I going now, Mr. King?
We're going to look at the questions you were asked about Ernst, and you recollect you were asked about the retail development that had taken place.
Yes.
Sainsbury's, the anchor,
yes.
What was happening. And it was pointed out to you that there are still some vacant units.
Yes.
In Ernst. Could you just remind us, please, what the position is as to whether the vacancy rate in Ernst Town Centre is well above the national average, the national average, or in fact well below the national average?
It's certainly below. I think there's a figure given in Mrs. Harding's proof, and I think I've dealt with that in my report.
Yes, you have.
Yes.
I think the figure is actually just a little over 9%, with the national average of 14%.
Yes, the average is about 13.5%, 14%.
Yes. In circumstances where a major redevelopment has taken place in a town,
yes,
we're in the midst of an economic recession, yes,
yes,
but a particular town centre shows a vacancy rate which is materially below the national vacancy rate. What do you say about the indications of that being a healthy or unhealthy town centre?
Well, it's my opinion, and I do a fair amount of retail work, so I think I'm experienced in this sector, is that is a very good indication of a strong and healthy centre which is achieving good vitality performance. That's demonstrated in Mrs. Harding's evidence by the way that it has gone up in the table of centre performance. So you've seen those figures. In the current climate, that is a very clear demonstration of both investor and occupier confidence in the centre.
The figure of 9.5% of the current vacancies is Mrs. Harding's
yes.
6.10.13 and page 59 of the proof.
Yes, that's right, 9.5%.
Then we have some,
I think that includes the Victoria Parade.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Yes, that's the
so it is the town centre as a whole.
Then we had some cross-examination about what the old development plan did in terms of regeneration areas.
Yes.
And you had an exchange, Mr. Fraser, about what the current development plan does.
Yes.
I just want to be absolutely clear with you. We know that the core strategy is up to date and its evidence base is up to date.
Yes.
Does the core strategy, please, identify any need for any further regeneration by way of regeneration area, town centre regeneration, or anything of that kind with regard to Elmston?
No.
Then you need to take up Mr. Hetherington's report in your first bundle of appendices.
Yes.
When we look at Mr. Hetherington's report and see he reports on a number of different schemes over a number of different pages.
Yes.
Yes? And then in relation to particular schemes, whether Barton Cross, Persimmon, or Hayes Green, Cadishead, he reports numbers of units, sales price ranges, and sales rates achieved.
Yes.
To what extent are those matters of fact, Mr. Simpson, please?
I understand them to be matters of fact.
Yeah.
I don't think they've been challenged in any way.
That you're ahead of me on the question.
Yes.
Is there any evidence before the inquiry, whether rebuttal from the council or otherwise, which indicates that the factual matters upon which Mr. Hetherington reports are wrong?
There is no evidence.
Related question. The council, having seen this evidence, which asserts that there is no basis for concluding that there has been any deterrent effect with regard to the economic health and the development market in this area since these proposals emerged, what evidence is there from the council, please, which demonstrates or attempts to demonstrate the contrary by reference to any development anywhere?
There is no evidence before the inquiry which shows that.
the things that Mr. Hetherington's report does is to demonstrate that since the Barton renewable energy plant proposal emerged, there has been developer activity either by way of actual building or the making of applications and the promotion of those planning applications with local planning authorities. Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you take up, please, I'm afraid it's your other volume of appendices, but your appendix 6. I beg your pardon, 7. Sinfin Lane, it
yes.
should be.
Yeah.
It is hope. And go, if you would, to paragraph 61 of Mr. Robinson's decision
Yes.
letter. Paragraph 61 tells us the view is expressed at the inquiry that the erection of the waste treatment facility would deter people from moving into the area. The evidence does not support this view.
Yes.
The proposed development has received much publicity, often of an adverse nature, yet this has not deterred developers from submitting planning applications for substantial residential developments within the locality, including further down Sinfin Lane to the south of the site. Developers would not be investing time and money in making applications for sizable housing schemes if they thought that prospective buyers would be put off by the proposed waste treatment facility. Do you know of any reason why that reasoning and that conclusion should not apply with regard to the range of development proposals which have been or are being promoted in this area?
No reason at all. I think exactly the same would apply.
And as to the cost, both in terms of the fee for making planning applications and the cost involved in the preparation of that the application material, can that be regarded in economically straitened times as an irrelevant consideration which developers would brush aside and regard as irrelevant?
It's a very significant consideration in the current climate and has been for a period of 3 to 4 years, and especially in the residential sector. Developers are not in the business of investing money in professional fees, in producing lots of different reports that support an application, paying application fees for developments that they see very little prospect of being able to progress. That is my experience and the experience of my practice generally.
Thank you. You go then, Mr. Hetherington's letter, please, to the last page. The first paragraph after the bullet point on the last page refers to the Persimmon Barton Cross
Yes.
site. That's the site.
That's the site we
on
looked at.
Broadway, opposite the
Yes.
Bedbrook pub, I think. Is that right?
Yes, it's the site we looked at which is nearest to the...
Yes.
That's
We're
right.
told that this achieved a sales rate of 5.8 for residential units per month, requesting sale price of... The site has sold quicker and commanded greater sale prices than other competing corporate house builder sites, which are of similar product, character and scale within the locality.
Yes.
Now, I'm quite happy, and I'm not going to ask you a re-examination, to invite the inspector to take an unaccompanied site visit to Caddishead to see whether or not the description applied to that site in cross-examination is a fair description of it. It's a site where 2 residential developers, Taylor Whitby and Redrow, are currently developing. But Mr. Singleton, on the basis that the site is not some awful site in the middle of a wasteland looking chemically contaminated, what's your view, please, as to the force of Mr. Hetherington's conclusion with regard to Barton Cross, bearing in mind its proximity to the appeal site?
I think that the conclusion he draws is a perfectly fair conclusion. The same factors that we've just discussed in relation to the willingness of developers both to incur substantial costs in promoting planning applications, but also then committing to implement schemes, would apply exactly in this case as they do elsewhere. So
you were then asked about a series of other developments. Now, I'm going to take them together. Seddon Homes, the Beach Housing Association, Peel Trafford Quays,
Yeah.
Arndale, and Calder Court, I think.
Yes, Calder Court.
With regard to those schemes and the costs of promoting them, getting the funding, spending the money, do any different considerations apply to those as to the other schemes and the point made in paragraph 61 of the Sinfin Lane decision?
The same factors apply more particularly in the straitened economic circumstances that we have in the property industry being experienced over the last 4 years or so, and as I said before, that has particularly affected house prices.
Right, thank you. Then I need to trouble you further with Mr. Hetherington's report. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Kingston, can we take a break for
Yes,
10 minutes?
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. I realise we're answering this.
We're making good progress.
But 10 minutes, I think.
Thank you very much.